Public Library. And this summer, we're going to be bringing you something a little bit different for story time. We're going to be doing STEAM story time. STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So what we're going to do is we're going to read a book together, and then we're going to attempt a project together. It'll be very fun. Our story today is The Best Nest by Petey Eastman. Look at these birds building a nest. You've probably seen a lot of that this spring. Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, my nest is best. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It's not the best, she said. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now. So they left the old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. But somebody else had already moved in. They do not look happy. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right. But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house. And here it is, right here. They flew in, they looked around. Isn't it too big? Asked Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First, they got some hay. Then they got some soda straws and broom straws. They got some sweater string. They got some stocking string and mattress stuffing. They got some horsehair. They got some man hair. Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horsehair, and all the man hair they could carry. They took it all back to build their nest. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest. This nest is really the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay forever. Mr. Bird was very happy too. He flew to the top of his house. He sang his song again. I love our house, I love our nest. In all the world, our nest is best. He was so busy singing, he didn't even see Mr. Parker coming. Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull a rope. The rope went up to the bird's new nest. The rope rang the big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Bong, bong, bong. Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and manhair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. He looked down into a chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. He looked down into a water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Then he saw a big fat cat. There was a big fat smile on the fat cat's face. There were some pretty brown feathers near the fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. Oh dear, he cried. This big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird. Oh no. Mr. Bird flew off. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder. Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. It was his old house. That old house that Mrs. Bird hated. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird. I'll rest here until the rain stops. Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. Bird, sitting there singing, I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world this nest is best. You? Here? Gasped Mr. Bird. I thought you hated this old nest. Mrs. Bird smiled. I used to hate it, she said, but a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. And when the egg popped open, the new bird thought so too. The end. Well, those birds sure had a time making a home for themselves. I bet that you and I can do a project now that will help birds like them make their new nest. Let's give it a try. Okay, so our project today is little nesting material dispensers that you can put outside so the birds can pull stuff out to make nests. This is stuff that you can do with materials you have at home. Right here, I have a little plate full of little bitty fabric scraps, little bits of yarn, cut up little bits of paper. You don't have to use colored paper. I just use the little scraps that I have. You could cut up junk mail that your parents don't want anymore, or old magazines, but check with your grown-up first before you start cutting. Your grown-ups might also have little bits of fabric and little bits of yarn if they do other crafts. I've also got some little bitty twiggies, little tiny sticks. And it's okay to break them up a little bit. You can find those outside. Those are free. And I've got an old potato sack. But if you don't have an old potato sack, You probably have an old grocery bag you can use, and that'll work just fine. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take some of these lovely little bits, and it's important to make sure that the little bits are no bigger than about 2 inches. So maybe like the size of your thumb is plenty big enough, because these birds are little and they've got to fly with this stuff. What you're gonna do is take some of your lovely little scrappy materials, as much as you want, and put it in the bag. Now you can either tie it with some string or a rubber band, or you can even just tie a knot in the bag. That's pretty easy. And then you've got a handle to hang it up with for later. Now you need to make a way for the birds to be able to get all these lovely scraps out of there. So you're gonna take some scissors. Again, ask your adult before you do. And just cut little bitty holes wherever you want. Whoops. And then you let a little bit of the stuffing come out so the birds can see it. So it's okay if it's all dangling. See how I've got some dangling out there and some dangling out on this one? That way the birds know that there's something in here that they want to try to get at. Cut as many holes as you need to so that they can see the stuff inside. And if you don't get it right the first time, that's okay. It's just a little grocery bag. You've got more, you can make more. And this is also a good skill, or a good craft to use your scissor skills on. So you preschoolers and kindergartners, go for it with your grown-ups help. Then you just hang it up outside and the birds can come get little fun things for their nest. I hope you have fun making this project. I hope you'll post pictures on Facebook in the comments of this post so we can see the cool things you've made. And we'll see you later, friends. Bye.